So, Ishwar, what has fascinated you most about China?
China is absolutely fascinating to an economist. This is an economy that has generated phenomenal growth year after year for 3 decades. It's managed to pull tens of millions of people out of poverty, deliver phenomenal standards of living to its citizens. But what is even more fascinating to an economist is that it's accomplished all this without playing by the standard rules of economics. This is an economy where there are enormous risks, lots of inefficiencies that we can point to, an economy that does not seem to adhere much to market principles, and yet they've delivered very good economic outcomes.
China is an economic superpower, the second largest economy in the world. But how do you see its influence in the world now?
This is why China's leaders feel that China does not match up, because its economic stature doesn't seem to be matched by its economic and political influence around the world. But China's leaders recognize that and are trying to change that. What they're trying to do is increase China's influence in the existing international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. They're setting up their own institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to rewrite the rules of the game, and bringing other countries like the emerging market countries such as Russia, South Africa, India into their fold in order to increase their influence.
So what does this all mean? What does it mean for the future of global cooperation?
At one level, China has played a very constructive role in issues such as climate change, trying to hold back the opposition to globalization, arguing that free trade is a good thing. So if China does play a constructive role, it could actually be very good for the international community. It could lead to better rules of international governments, and it could lead to a more balanced world where you don't have just one hegemon, the US, that gets to dictate the rules of the game. But whether China will truly put the interests of the world before its own interests remains to be seen.
So China also has its own ambitions for its currency, the renminbi. But let me just ask you a pedestrian question. Some refer to the Chinese currency as the Yuan. Others refer to it as a renminbi. What is the difference?
This perplexes a lot of people with good reason. It turns out the renminbi is the name of the currency, just means people's currency, while the yuan is the unit of account. So it's sort of like the British pound sterling, which is the name of the currency. But if you go into a pub in London, they're going to quote you a price for a pint in terms of pounds, not pound sterling. So it's basically the same thing.
And I also understand they have other names for the currency too.
Yes, Kwai is the street name for the currency.
That's right. So can the renminbi become the international global reserve currency?
Here's yet another fascinating thing about China. In principle, the currency should not be a world-class currency because China does not have a market-determined exchange rate for its currency. It does not allow for the free flow of capital across its borders. And yet, because of the sheer economic size of China, its currency has already become an international currency used quite widely in settlement of trade and financial transactions across borders. But I argue in my book that it's not going to become a world-beating currency unless China is willing to take much bigger changes. It needs the rule of law. It needs a more open and transparent form of government. It needs trusted institutions, public institutions like an independent central bank. And China's government has made it very clear that it's willing to undertake certain economic reforms, but not these broader political and institutional reforms that are necessary to engender the trust of foreign investors. So it is going to become a more important currency, but will it ever become a world-class currency that rivals the dollar? Unlikely.